Welcome back to TacNTrack. I'm Brad, and today we're going to be talking about my Ruger 1022 custom build. We're going to break it apart. We're going to talk about all the parts that were used in the build, the overall cost of a build like this, what is really good about this rifle, and what could have probably been done better. But before we get into that, we kind of need to start with the purpose behind which this rifle was built. I had two overall goals with this rifle. One, build a rifle for Steel Challenge and Rimfire Challenge that I could make no excuses about as far as the gun's performance. The second one is to build a high quality rifle to train other shooters and to bring a gun in that would be very user friendly for training new people how to shoot firearms. So, put this gun together completely from scratch, and overall I'm extremely pleased with the results. So let's break it down, talk about the parts that were used. Alright, so let's start with the receiver, and then we'll work our way from tip to butt here. So the receiver that this is built off of is a BRN-22 receiver. This is actually not from Ruger, so I didn't have to start with a complete gun and tear it down. This is actually from Brownells. The buying experience with anything from Brownells here lately has been pretty bad, but the receiver itself turned out to be pretty good. It did require some slight modifications for the bolt work. Up front, we've got a TK muzzle brake. We've got a Valquartson lightweight carbon fiber barrel that is just absolutely beautiful. It's all wrapped in a Magpull Hunter stock. Up top, we've got a Seymour Optic on the gun, followed by a match bolt carrier group, and then we've got a Timney Calvin Elite trigger. So let's break this gun down. We'll talk about each of the components and how much everything cost as a whole. So up front on this rifle we have the TK muzzle brake. The TK muzzle brake does do a pretty good job at eliminating any recoil that the 22 ever dreamed of having. Really though, the only time that I really feel like this is a big game changer is if you're shooting it in competition and with pretty fast moving loads. This will help you a little bit. Although if you're looking to cut some corners, I think the TK muzzle brake is something that can be cut. When we ordered our Valquartson lightweight carbon barrel here, it did come with a threaded nut for the end of the barrel. So you do have an option to cover these threads if you go through the build like this and don't want to spend the money on a brake. This barrel is extremely lightweight and has proven to give excellent results, even with how much we shoot this gun, how fast we shoot this. Just to kind of give you some perspective, we've got about 10,000 rounds or more on this platform, and we've been running it for about 6 to 8 months here. So relatively new build, but still has a fairly high round count on it. Valquartson just makes really good 22 stuff, and I feel like this barrel is no exception to that. Now, one of the most important parts of this build is the trigger group. So the trigger group that we have here is a Timney Calvin Elite. We have another gun with another Timney trigger in it, and it is really good. But this Calvin Elite just really takes this to the next level because you have adjustability in your trigger as well as a super lightweight trigger. So you can adjust the cant of your trigger, the height of the shoe, and you can adjust how far forwards and backwards in the trigger guard that trigger actually sits. We also have a oversized and enlarged mag release on the bottom of the gun. It's really nice. This is also a really good place to rest that second finger as you're reaching back towards the stock with this Magpull Hunter stock. So you'll see me almost always shoot this with one finger on the side of the trigger guard, or of course pulling the trigger, my second finger on the mag release and my other two on the stock itself, and I found that gives me a really good grip angle and a really good hold on the gun. I am a left eye dominant shooter, so I typically shoot my rifles left-handed, And having the ability to cant this trigger slightly to the left is really nice, because most triggers are slanted slightly to the right by factory default. So as a left-handed shooter, being able to push this trigger the other direction a little bit has been really, really nice. But I think that even if you're a right-handed shooter, you'll find being able to place that trigger exactly where you want it is a really nice addition. And that's something that we get only with the Calvin Elite out of the Timney line. It's an aluminum trigger housing, and it has run flawlessly. We clean these guns fairly often, but this one in particular, just with how much it gets shot, sometimes it'll get shot in 3 competitions in 3 days, and we'll put 1,500 rounds through it in 3 days, and of course go without cleaning it during that time period, so we don't have to really worry about resetting our zero or anything like that. So overall, this trigger is probably my favorite part of this build, and it has performed really well. So let's go ahead and put a trigger gauge on here so we can see exactly what the pull out of this trigger is. Alright, so we've got our gauge on here. We can go ahead and pull this trigger and see where it breaks. 1 pound 7. We'll reset this. £1.7. And we're going to pull it again. £1.9. It's pretty consistently breaking between 1.4 and 1.9. I think more of the inconsistency has to do with our gauge rather than the gun itself. So now that we've taken a look at trigger pull, let's take a look at take up here. So we're going to go ahead and pull this trigger here. Boop. There's our break point. Then we're going to reset it. Put our finger off. There's our reset. Very positive reset engagement. Very good feel on reset engagement. Very little take up. Very little reset. And an extremely positive engagement. And a really nice wall, especially for a trigger as light as this. So the next most important part of this build is the optic itself. And what we opted for here was a Seymour Railway. And the Seymour optic, if you're not familiar with it, we'll do an entire review on it. But the Seymour optic itself is a very old optic. However, offers a extremely good field of view. We're using an 8 MOA dot on this gun, because that gives us a nice big dot that's really easy and fast to find to help us hit those targets really, really fast. And the precision of less than 8 MOA isn't something that we're interested in, although the rifle's certainly capable of doing that. And the emitters on these Seymours can be swapped out for other dots. So we could go to a 2 or 1 MOA dot on this simply by changing the emitter. We don't have to take the optic off the gun even. We can just swap that emitter up top and put on a different emitter for a different MOA. However, for what we're doing with this gun, that 8 MOA is absolutely perfect. And the Seymour really is the best choice for a competition grade optic. What I will say about the Seymour, either the plastic or the aluminum bodied Seymours, is it's probably not the most durable optic. So if you're going to be using your gun maybe for something a little bit more rugged and you want something that is fairly durable, I would not recommend the Seymour for that. And we'll do a whole series on optics. We've done the Bushnell TRS 25. It's a very reasonably priced, fairly durable, really, really cheap optic that'll get the job done for you as well. But for this build, we needed something with that giant unobstructed field of view that we're only going to get with the Seymour Railway. The next portion of the build is probably the one that I am the least happy with, just because it doesn't fit exactly what I'm looking for. but overall I think it's a very, very good stock. This is the Magpull Hunter stock. The Magpull Hunter stock has the availability to use bull barrels or the thinner factory diameter Ruger barrels. We have adjustable length of pull by adding sections back here to the back of the stock. We've got them all removed from this one to kind of give us a faster snap up to those first targets here. It also has an adjustable cheek riser, so you can change out the cheek riser and get your head more up off the gun. This is the one that the stock actually came with and is a real nice smooth finish on it and works fairly well for what we do with it. My one gripe here is I wish this was a little bit lighter. I also wish I had a little bit more real estate out here on the front of the gun so I could reach out and grab that gun a little bit further up so I could increase my speed between targets. But as far as a trainer, this is probably the ideal stock, and overall it's very, very good. If you guys have some better stock options or stock thoughts for me, let me know, because this is certainly something I'd be interested in changing out on this particular build. The bolt that we chose for our build is this Power Customs match bolt. This has been the weak point of the gun. We've already kind of talked about the fact that I've used this a fair amount in competition, and it'll sometimes go 1,500 rounds before cleaning, just because of the nature of how that we use it. But as this begins to get dirty, failures to extract live rounds are very common. I haven't had any failure to extract, haven't had any problems as long as I'm running the gun normally, but when it's time to unload and show clear, I almost always have to shoot the live round out of the gun on the second day of competition, sometimes even towards the tail end of the first day of competition. That extractor does not want to pull a live unfired round out of the gun, and I'm forced to shoot that round out of the gun. Which, with where we shoot, that's not a big deal. However, that's really annoying for a bolt as expensive as this one was, and I really expected a little bit better performance here. Besides that one issue though, bolts run great. I've had no issues whatsoever. Some of the things that you may not think about when you're building a build like this is some of the small parts. Alright, so some of the small parts that you're going to need for your build, you're going to need a V-block and V-block mounting screws to hold this barrel in place in your receiver. The next thing you're going to need is a screw to hold the stock to the receiver itself. We used a Power Customs here. It was a little bit more expensive, but it was only $6.99. You're going to need your pins to hold your trigger group to your receiver, as well as the pin for the back of the bolt carrier group. You're going to need a recoil spring and charging handle. Now, this is the only Ruger part in our entire build here, is the factory Ruger spring set and charging handle. This is another one of those things that could be upgraded here, especially with a little bit larger charge handle here, so we can get a little bit better grip on the build. However, this factory Ruger setup seems to work just fine for what we're doing with the gun, and at $6.99, well, you can't really argue with that. Together, all of our small parts cost a total of $45.97. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it does add up on you, especially once you've already purchased some of these more expensive components. The next thing that you're going to want a bunch of is magazines, and there's a few options out there on the market. There's the BX25 mags and the BX15 mags. They're actually from Ruger. They have a tendency to work fairly well. Now, we have had some issues out of these. You do have to take them apart to clean them. They require a little bit more maintenance. I will also tell you that generically, the solid black ones tend to work better than the black and clear. Well, the clear is really nice because you can see your round count in it. The clear plastic seems to be of a little bit lower quality than what we get out of the solid black ones. This one in particular has had quite a few problems with case separation and not wanting to run right. Some other options out there, these are the Butler Creek 25 round mags. They snap together nicely. So you've got a 50 round pack that you can flip over and run in the gun. These work great. I've had no issues, no problems with these once we got about 200 rounds through each one of them. They did have a fairly high break-in period. The next option on the table for magazines is the Pro Mags. The Pro Mags have given pretty consistent issues. They are nice because they snap together. They are also inexpensive as far as magazines go. And they do have a high capacity at 30 rounds. But these have been problematic at best. The magazine that works the best and runs the best in the guns is the factory 10 round rotary mags. Those work great. The other magazine options just don't work as well as the factory 10 round mags. However, the additional ammunition capacity is really beneficial. I actually have enough of these to run a full steel challenge match without having to reload. So that's a really nice thing to have, especially if you're going to shoot 2 or 3 guns. But all in all, these little parts, they do add up over time. So without magazines, this entire build setup is $1,413.31. So that begs the question, is it really worth it? Because that's a lot of money. We've previously done a video on the Ruger 1022 Target Light. That's certainly more affordable of an option than this kind of build and setup is, and nearly as good a gun. So if we took a look at our co-host, who's not here, Gil's 1022 Target Light with a Timney upgraded trigger in it and a Seymour up top, it's going to come in about $400 cheaper than this build. But I really feel like this entire setup's worth it. If you're going to be spending the kind of money that you're going to be spending on a high quality Ruger 1022, go the extra mile, buy some of these nicer components, and you'll really get a lot more out of the gun, especially if you're going to shoot the gun as much as we shoot ours. If you're talking about putting 10 to 20,000 rounds a year through a firearm, spend some money on the gun, enjoy the gun. You'll also find you'll spend more time with your 22 if it's this high in quality than you will some of your other firearms, and I think long term it'll save you some money. So if I could go back and do it all over again, what would I do differently? The first thing that I would do differently, and probably going to do fairly soon, is I'm going to replace the charging handle with something a little bit larger. That's not a very expensive upgrade that gets you good results. The second thing I would have done differently is I would have gone with a different bolt. Valquartson makes a bolt for this gun that I'm sure is very good. That would have been the option that I would have gone with had the Valquartson bolt been available at the time in which I was building this. Fortunately, it wasn't, so I tried to cut a little bit of a corner and not wait on the Valquartsons to come back into stock, and I really do regret that. The next thing up on the list that you might want to do differently is the stock. While this Ruger Hunter is a absolutely fantastic all-around stock, it leaves a little bit to be desired specifically for Steel Challenge. But if you're just looking for a really good blinker, this stock is great. And its adjustability really helps it mold to the shooter. Because no two shooters are exactly the same, and if you're building a custom rifle like this, you want to be able to fit it to you. And if that's what you're looking for, this is a reasonably cost-effective option to get there. but it's probably going to be something that I'm going to change out over time on this build. So all in all, I really feel like it was a good value proposition despite its price tag, because $1,400 for a 22 is a lot of money. Tell me what you guys think about our build. Let me know what you guys want to see next from us. And if you want us to bring out more 22s, we will. Or you want to see some of the higher caliber stuff, and you want to bring out the FN, FAL, we'll be more than happy to put together a video for you guys. Like always, thanks for your time, and thanks for checking us out today on TacNTrack.